Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive paradox in modern geopolitics. What if a country's absolute biggest diplomatic strength isn't about choosing sides, but literally refusing to be trapped by them? We're going to ask if a nation that calls itself a friend to the world can actually influence devastating, complex wars in Ukraine and West Asia, or if it's really just managing these global crises to protect its own strategic interests.
And honestly, that brings us to the fundamental question driving Indian foreign policy today. Can a friend to all actually end wars? New Delhi is attempting this incredible, high-wire diplomatic balancing act. They're trying to speak directly to Moscow and Kyiv, to Tehran and Tel Aviv, literally all at the same time. But as we'll see, the real question isn't necessarily whether India can just snap its fingers and single-handedly end these conflicts. It's about whether India can actually influence the conditions that make peace possible.
So let's define our core concept here. If you've watched recent international forums, you've probably heard Indian leaders heavily use the Sanskrit term Vishwa Mitra. It translates to friend of the world. It's a fascinating diplomatic narrative. It suggests India seeks partnership through cooperation, dialogue, and practical support, rather than dominance through coercion or these rigid bloc alliances. But let's be real, being a friend of the world implies an immense responsibility. You have to be trusted by multiple warring parties, and that is significantly harder than just standing on the sidelines as a neutral bystander.
In this explainer, we'll break this down chapter by chapter. We're going to look at the Vishwa Mitra paradox, how India navigates the Ukraine war, the rising tensions in West Asia, the clash between strategic autonomy and moral leadership, and finally, what the real test of this friendship looks like.
Chapter 1. The Vishwa Mitra Paradox, Balancing Ideals with Realpolitik. The phrase Vishwa Mitra sounds deeply principled, right? But it requires a really careful look. We have to ask, does India's actual behavior back up this identity? It's not just about sounding like a friend. It's about whether competing nations actually view New Delhi as a credible, impartial bridge.
Chapter 2. Navigating the Ukraine War. Diplomacy without formal mediation. When we look at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, we literally see this paradox in action. India has been incredibly consistent here, repeatedly calling for an immediate end to hostilities and a return to dialogue, while keeping direct lines of communication wide open with both Kyiv and Moscow.
But notice the stark contrast we have here. On one side, you have India's public diplomatic stance, calling for peace, respect for territorial integrity, and dialogue. But weighing right against that are India's core strategic interests. We're talking about preserving its long-standing, vital energy ties with Russia. So, what this means is, India acts more as a diplomatic balancer. Yes, it urges peace, absolutely, but it does so while meticulously protecting its own interests. Consistency here doesn't equal formal mediation, it's a very, very calculated equilibrium.
Moving to Chapter 3, Tensions in West Asia, Walking the Narrowest Diplomatic Path. In West Asia, India faces an even tighter margin. New Delhi has to navigate deeply entrenched existential confrontations here, and the diplomatic path is incredibly narrow.
Just look at how deeply India is invested on both sides of this divide. With Israel, India is rapidly expanding ties, defense, technology, security cooperation. But at the exact same time, with Iran, India shares historic civilizational links, crucial energy ties, and strategic connectivity projects like the Chabahar port. Because India has deep ties with both nations, it can effectively pick up the phone, urge restraint, and keep those communication channels open. However, actually ending a deeply ideological conflict between states that view each other as existential threats, well, that is entirely out of New Delhi's hands.
And this brings us to a really sharp critique of India's approach, perfectly captured by its actions at the UN Security Council. Notice this fascinating duality. India has actually co-sponsored UNSC resolutions condemning Iran's attacks on Gulf countries. Why? Because it needs to protect the massive Indian diaspora in the Gulf and make it clear that regional instability is unacceptable. Yet simultaneously, it preserves those energy and connectivity ties with Tehran. Now, critics might call this UNSC voting duality inconsistency or even hypocrisy, but defenders, they call it the raw, pragmatic realism of multi-alignment logic.
Condemn the immediate threat for sure, but never ever burn your long-term strategic bridges. Chapter 4. Autonomy versus moral leadership. The diplomatic cost of true mediation. Let's see how all of this builds into the deeper tension right at the heart of India's foreign policy.
Here is the absolute crux of the issue. Strategic autonomy is brilliant for maximizing India's room to maneuver. It flawlessly protects immediate trade, oil security, and keeps them completely out of bloc politics. But moral leadership? Well, that requires a country to step out of that safety zone. True global mediation demands high moral clarity, a willingness to take public risks, and crucially, the readiness to incur a diplomatic cost. And in both Ukraine and West Asia, India has, so far, stopped short of paying that heavy political price that a true mediator often has to pay.
Because of this, we really have to avoid naive optimism here. We need to recognize the limits. India simply does not control the structural causes of these wars. It doesn't control NATO architecture or Russian security doctrine. Instead, its role is to use its unique access to lower mistrust, shape the diplomatic environment, and act as a facilitative bridge for communication and humanitarian relief. Ultimately, the decisive heavy lifting has to be done by the warring parties themselves. India is a facilitator making peace more achievable, not a commander forcing it to happen.
Chapter 5. The real test of friendship. Earning credibility continuously in a fractured world. So, in our final chapter, we have to ask a really vital question.
Despite these hard limits, and despite prioritizing its own strategic autonomy, why does the global community still actively listen to India's voice? Well, the reasons are actually quite compelling. India isn't just a major economy, a democracy, and a military power. Crucially, it's a vital voice representing the global South. Its unique advantage is its independent, non-aligned foreign policy logic. It's not a proxy for any Western or Eastern bloc, and that grants India immense credibility to speak for nations that are frankly exhausted by polarization, nations that desperately prioritize practical diplomacy, trade, and energy stability over endless geopolitical maneuvering.
Ultimately, what you should take away from this explainer is this exact point. The true test of India's Vishwa Mitra claim is remaining principled under immense pressure, without sliding into becoming a partisan actor. It's about preserving ties with Russia without seeming indifferent to Ukraine. It's about working with Israel while still supporting de-escalation with Iran. If India can thread this incredibly complex needle, then Vishwa Mitra shifts from just a public relations slogan to a highly effective working diplomatic method. As India continues to navigate this deeply fractured world, keeping doors open and making diplomacy possible where it otherwise literally wouldn't be, I want to leave you to ponder this final thought. Has New Delhi truly become the world's trusted diplomatic bridge, or is it simply managing its own ascent on the global stage? Thank you so much for joining.